We've all heard of Augustus or Nero, but have you ever noticed that some Roman names just feel more imperial? Some sound like a fortress being built, and others sound like a ray of light. When I read about the Roman emperors, I almost can't help but grade their names on a curve. So I decided to turn that interest into a video. So today we're ranking the most powerful names in Roman history. No politics, no morality, just the names. Before we get started, the criteria. We're looking at the era from Augustus in 27 BC to the fall of the Western Empire in 476. Whether they ruled from Rome or Constantinople, if they wore the purple before the year 476, they're eligible. Out of roughly 70 men, I've narrowed it down to the 10 most powerful sounding names in Roman history. I've ranked them on 3 10-point scales. The first is phonetics. How does it feel to say aloud? We're looking for the perfect architecture of sound, a balance of sibilant hisses, hard stops, and deep resonance. The second is legacy. This is the shadow the name casts over time. Does the emperor own that name? When you hear the word, what do you think of? Do you think of him? The last is aura. This is the vibe check. If you heard this name in a dark hallway without knowing a single thing about history, would you feel a sense of radiance or a sense of dread? Lastly, I will be ranking their commonly known English names, not the Latin ones. Whoever scores the highest out of 30 wins. And without further ado, let's get started. Starting us off at number 10, we have the most eccentric name on our list, Elagabalus. Reigning from 218 to 222, this Syrian-born teenager was a high priest who attempted to replace Jupiter with a black meteorite representing his sun god. He is remembered as one of Rome's most controversial and alien figures, more interested in religious revolution than imperial administration. The name Elagabalus is actually a nickname. It's a Latinized version of the Arabic Ila al-Jabal, meaning God of the Mountain. While his official title was Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, history remembers him by this exotic 5-syllable rolling wave of a name. Phonetically, it's an outlier. It doesn't sound like the cold, hard marble of Rome, but it does sound sort of Eastern, ancient, sort of mysterious. It forces the speaker to slow down, which gives it this ritualistic quality that no other name really captures. Okay, so now for the power rating breakdown. For phonetic weight, I gave him a 10 out of 10. It really is a linguistic powerhouse. It's one of the most physically satisfying and unique names just to say aloud. For legacy, I gave him a 1 out of 10. Elagabalus fails the ownership test almost completely. Outside of history buffs, the name is almost completely unknown, and if you just heard the name, you wouldn't think he was a Roman emperor. For aura, I gave him a 7 out of 10. It carries this Eastern mystic vibe. It's not completely oriental, but just exotic enough to provoke interest. That leaves Elagabalus with a score of 18 out of 30. Coming in at number 9, we have the man with the most intimidating doubleheader on our list, Septimius Severus. Reigning from 193 to 211, the Libyan-born Severus seized power during the chaotic year of the 5 emperors and transformed Rome into a military dictatorship. He is famous for his final advice to his sons: stay on good terms with each other, pay the soldiers, and despise everyone else. Septimius is a traditional Roman clan name, but his cognomen, Severus, is the root word of the English word severe. His name is a masterclass in aggression. The S creates an open hissing sound, as well as providing some alliteration, while it has just enough consonants to give the name some weight. It is one of the few names on this list that tells you exactly what kind of man you're dealing with before he even speaks. Alright, now it's time for the power rating. For phonetic weight, I gave him a 10 out of 10. It has a heavy grinding rhythm, and it feels both thick and serious, and it hits the ear with a sense of weightiness. For legacy, I gave him a 2 out of 10. Septimius doesn't own the name, so I can't give him higher than that. Despite his historical importance, the name Severus has largely been hijacked by pop culture and fictional wizards. For aura, I gave him a 9 out of 10. Total intimidation. It carries the weight of a man who ruled by the sword. That gives Septimius Severus a score of 21 out of 30. At number 8, we have the name that sounds like the blueprint for a high fantasy empire, Valerian. Reigning from 253 to 260 during the height of the 3rd century crisis, Valerian's story is one of the most tragic in Roman history. He holds the grim distinction of being the only emperor to ever be captured alive in battle, spending his final years as a prisoner and a human footstool for the Persian king Shapur I. The name Valerianus comes from the Latin valere, meaning to be strong or to be worth. Phonetically, it's great, possessing a liquid power where the V and L sounds make it feel both elegant and ancient. The 4 syllables roll off the tongue with an authority that sounds less like a historical figure and more like a name belonging to a species of high elves or maybe a lost civilization. Okay, now for the power rating for Valerius. For phonetic weight, I gave him a 10 out of 10. It has a perfect linguistic balance. It's light enough to be graceful, but heavy enough to be imperial. It's probably one of the most beautiful sounding names in the Roman catalog. For legacy, I gave him a 3 out of 10. Valerian definitely fails the ownership test. While the name Valerian is famous in sci-fi and fantasy, from dragon lords and space agents, almost nobody associates it with the 3rd century emperor. He didn't claim the name, he just occupied it for a while. For aura, I gave Valerian a 9 out of 10. His name just has this fallen civilization feel that I really just love. That leaves Valerian with a total of 22 points out of 30. At number 7, we have the restless architect and traveler of the provinces, Hadrian. Reigning from 117 to 138, at the very height of the Roman power, Hadrian was the man who stopped the empire's expansion to focus on its preservation. Best known for his massive wall in Britain and for rebuilding the Pantheon, he spent more time traveling the empire than any other ruler, obsessed with bringing Greek culture and Roman order to every corner of the world. The name Hadrian is sleek and it feels surprisingly modern, originally a geographical name signifying a family connection to the town of Hadria in Hispania. It lacks the aggressive, clunky endings found in many other Roman titles. Phonetically, it is balanced and fluid. The hard D provides a structural anchor in the middle, while the final N gives it a grounded, metallic clarity. It's a name that feels like it was really designed. Now for the power rating. For phonetic weight, I gave Hadrian a 10 out of 10. That's an easy choice. It's concise, rolls off the tongue with ease, and is just very satisfying to say. For legacy, I gave Hadrian a 6 out of 10. The only time people say his name is in reference to the wall. So the name itself hasn't been fully claimed by the emperor. For aura, I gave him a 7 out of 10. It sounds elegant, cultured, and clean. The name of a man who prefers a compass and a blueprint to a bloody sword. The final tally for Hadrian is 23 out of 30. Coming in at number 6, we have the man who started it all, the founder himself, Augustus. Reigning from 27 BC to 1480, Augustus was the first and arguably greatest Roman emperor, ending a century of civil war and establishing the Pax Romana. He famously claimed to have found Rome a city of bricks and left it a city of marble. The name Augustus was not a birth name, but a religious title bestowed upon him by the Senate. It means the illustrious or the venerable. But to me, the name Augustus just sounds too regal and too airy. It lacks the consonants that gives names like Septimius and Hadrian some gravity. Okay, now for the power ratings for Augustus. For phonetic weight, I gave him 5 out of 10. The name just feels too light and kind of even feminine. It flows and breathes, but it doesn't crack. For legacy, this is a clear 10 out of 10. Total ownership. Augustus has effectively colonized this word. Despite it becoming the name of a month and a common adjective, when you hear Augustus, your mind goes straight to the man in the toga. His legacy couldn't be higher. For aura, I gave him a 9 out of 10. It's a great name for a founder and it fits that role perfectly. It's just too light for my taste. That leaves Augustus with a score of 24 out of 30. So now we've reached the top 5. Coming in at 5th spot, we have the man who built the Colosseum and restored the soul of Rome, Vespasian. Reigning from 69 to 79 AD, Vespasian rose from a relatively humble origins to end the chaos of the civil wars following the death of Nero. He was a practical, grit and iron soldier known for his sharp wit and for founding the Flavian dynasty, leaving behind the world's most iconic amphitheater as his lasting mark. The name Vespasian is a phonetic juggernaut. It is a hissing name, but unlike the soft breath of Augustus, the V and the P here provide some weight. The Vesp prefix carries a stinging quality, reminiscent of the Latin word for wasp, while the Asian ending provides a sweeping, grand finish. It is a name that sounds inherently busy and industrious, perfectly matching the personality of the man who spent his life cleaning up the messes of the emperors that came before him. Alright, now for the power rating. For phonetic weight, I gave Vespasian a 10 out of 10. This name hits the ear with a unique energy. The transition from the beginning of the name Vesp to the end of the name Asian, it just sounds so good to the ear. For legacy, I gave him a 6 out of 10. While the Flavian Amphitheater is known to every person on Earth, the name Vespasian itself has largely retreated into the history books. He lacks the branding and recognition of an Augustus. For aura, I gave him a 9 out of 10. It sounds like the name of a man who just gets things done, sturdy, reliable, and slightly dangerous. It's the linguistic equivalent of a perfectly laid Roman road. That leaves Vespasian with a score of 25 out of 30. Okay, at number 4, we have the man whose name is so phonetically perfect, I chose it as the inspiration for my own channel, Aurelian. Reigning for just 5 years, from 270 to 275, Aurelian was the restorer of the world. He performed the ultimate historical miracle, taking a shattered empire that had split into 3 pieces and welding it back together through sheer military brilliance and a relentless will to win. Derived from the Latin aurum, meaning gold, the name Aurelianus is the most beautiful title in the Roman catalog. It's a masterclass in liquid phonetics. The AU opening is soft and radiant, flowing into a rhythmic 4-syllable finish that just feels ancient and expensive. While other names sound like iron or stone, Aurelian sounds like light. It is a name that doesn't just describe a person, it describes a sunrise, which is fitting for an emperor who is a devout worshiper of the sun god, Sol Invictus. Okay, now for the power rating of Aurelian. For phonetic weight, I gave him a 10 out of 10. It's arguably the gold standard of Roman naming. It possesses a melodic, high-status gravity that is effortless to pronounce but impossible to ignore. For legacy, I gave him a 6 out of 10. While he isn't a household name for the general public, his legacy lives on through his aura. He has a go-to fantasy sci-fi name similar to Valerian. For aura, I gave him a 10 out of 10. It projects a vibe of high-tier nobility and triumph over chaos. It is the linguistic equivalent of a golden crown. And that leaves Aurelian with a score of 26 out of 30. All right, we've reached the top 3. And in third place, we have Constantine, the man who remade the world. Reigning from 306 to 337, Constantine was a visionary who moved the heart of the empire from Rome to the east. By legalizing Christianity and founding the New Rome of Constantinople, he shifted the entire axis of human history, setting the stage for the next 1,000 years of civilization. The name Constantinus is built from the Latin constans, meaning steadfast or immovable. It is a name that feels as though it was chiseled directly into a mountain. Phonetically, it is one of the most authoritative titles on my list, opening with a sharp percussive K sound and following a strict 3-beat military rhythm. It is a name that sounds like the very definition of stability and monumental change. For his power rankings, I gave his phonetic weight a 9 out of 10. It's pretty much perfect. The hard C at the start and the firm N ending makes it sound like a closing door. It's heavy and balanced at the same time, but undeniably imperial. For legacy, that's an obvious 10 out of 10. Total ownership. He's claimed the name for all time. Between the city of Constantinople and its status as a foundational name in Western history, his legacy score is untouchable. When you hear this name, there's only one man who comes to mind. For aura, I gave it an 8 out of 10. It sounds like a name destined to be carved into marble for all time. So that leaves Constantine with a score of 27 out of 30. Now on to the top 2. All right, now we have Trajan, the gold standard of Roman authority and peak imperial power. Reigning from 98 to 117, Trajan was a soldier emperor who pushed Rome to its greatest territorial extent. He was so universally respected that for centuries after his death, the Senate would inaugurate new emperors with the prayer that they be luckier than Augustus and better than Trajan. His name is unique in that it starts with the TR consonant cluster, which is kind of rare. But when they do appear, they have this tendency to invoke authority, kind of like the name Troy, for example. It lacks the decorative fluff of longer 4-syllable names, opting instead for 2 syllables of pure concentrated power. It sounds grounded, masculine, and entirely immovable. For Trajan's power rating, I went with a 9 out of 10 for phonetic weight. It hits like a punch. It's concise and carries a metallic, sharp resonance that feels both ancient and disciplined. For legacy, I gave him a 10 out of 10. Again, total ownership. Trajan has successfully claimed this sound across 2 millennia. When you hear the name, you don't think of a month, a saint, or a modern derivative of his name. You think of the man, the column, and the height of Rome. For aura, that's an easy 10 out of 10. It carries the aura of supreme competence and victory. It's the name of a man who does not lose. That leaves Trajan with a score of 29 out of 30. And finally, what's probably a first in Roman historical rankings. Standing alone at number 1, we have the most infamous, most magnetic, and most phonetically perfect name in Roman history, Nero. Reigning from 54 to 68, Nero was the last of the Julio-Claudian dynasty and the first true supervillain of the Western world. He was a man who saw the empire as his personal stage. Among his misdeeds are murdering his own mother, as well as the famous story of him performing as a lyre player while the capital was consumed by the Great Fire. Probably didn't happen, but it's a good story nonetheless. But his infamy goes deeper than just history. To the early Christians he persecuted, Nero wasn't just a tyrant, he was a literal antichrist, a figure of such profound evil that many believed he would one day rise from the dead to finish his war against the heavens. Phonetically, Nero is a masterclass in linguistic impact. It is a rare example of a name that achieves a 10 out of 10 phonetic weight with only 2 syllables. While the name originally meant valiant, 2,000 years of being linked to the number of the beast have twisted those sounds into something that feels dangerous, cold, and profoundly authoritative. Now for his power rating. For phonetic weight, I gave him a 10 out of 10. It's the ultimate heavy name. It's impossible to say Nero without it sounding like something bad is about to happen. Its brevity is its strength. It is a concentrated dose of phonetic force that doesn't need to beg for attention. For legacy, I gave him a 10 out of 10. That's obvious. Total absolute ownership. Like the most infamous dictators of the modern era, Nero has effectively killed his own name for anyone else. He has colonized the sound so thoroughly that it is no longer just a name, it is an archetype. When you hear it, you don't think of a person, you think of the end of an era. For aura, a 10 out of 10. Between the Roman accounts of his madness and the biblical associations with the end of days, Nero possesses so much dark energy that it's hard to believe he actually existed in our timeline. It's a name that still commands the room and the imagination, 2,000 years after his stage went dark. That leaves Nero with the perfect score, 30 out of 30. And that's it, the 10 emperors who had the greatest, most impactful names. I think most of you will agree with most of the names on the list, even if you don't agree with the placement. I know Nero at number 1 is a heavy, controversial choice, but whether you see him as a misunderstood artist or the literal antichrist, the sheer black hole gravity of those 4 letters is unmatched. But remember, the Roman Empire didn't go out in 476. It moved east to Constantinople, producing a whole new era of names like Justinian, Heraclius, and Basil. So who did I snub? Does Nero deserve the crown? Or was there a name with even more aura that I missed? Let me know in the comments and tell me if you want a part 2 focusing on the Eastern Roman Empire. Thanks for watching.